recording. There you are. And now we have Anthony Samsel to tell us about his Rainwater project, again related to glyphosate. Go ahead, Anthony.
Okay. This conversation is about glyphosate and rainwater. A few years back, the U.S. Geological Survey found glyphosate in rainwater, and they attributed it to glyphosate riding on dust particles, contaminating the rain. And I got thinking about that, and I suspected that glyphosate was getting into ethanol that's used in gasoline, jet fuel, and biodiesel. And I purchased some ethanol from China because U.S. ethanol manufacturers, this goes back about a year or so ago, U.S. ethanol manufacturers didn't want to talk to me about the potential of glyphosate being in ethanol. Now, glyphosate can form esters with alcohols. And so knowing that glyphosate is found in virtually all wine and beer that's being produced, I had a hunch that the ethanol used for biofuels would be contaminated. So
that's coming from the grains out of which the alcohol, the drinks are
grains being fermented, and the alcohol becoming an ester of glyphosate. So chemically bonding and being carried in the ethanol that way. So I purchased biofuel ethanol from corn out of China, several samples the Chinese shipped me, and I analyzed it, and I found glyphosate in the ethanol. Later this year, I got some ethanol from corn from U.S. suppliers, and I analyzed that. That was contaminated with glyphosate as well. Very low levels of glyphosate, a part or a few parts per billion detectable, but it's still in the ethanol that goes into biofuels.
This is made in the US. It is made out of corn.
Excuse me.
In USA, the ethanol is made out of corn or out of which crop?
Ethanol is made out of corn. It can be made out of soy. It can be made out of anything that you can ferment.
Yeah, I know. But in USA, what do they use?
It's mainly made from corn.
Okay.
And I've got some statistics. The Corn for Ethanol program began in 1981. And in 1981, they produced 83.1 million gallons of ethanol from corn. Now that corn is all genetically engineered, all sprayed with glyphosate, so you can surmise that it's all contaminated with glyphosate. And as I said, the ethanol is put into biodiesel, it's put into gasoline and jet fuel. So virtually everything, every combustion engine is burning ethanol with its fuel. And glyphosate is thermally stable. So it's not getting destroyed. It's being vaporized because fuels are not totally consumed in internal combustion engines. They're very inefficient. So some of the fuels are being vaporized, and the glyphosate is getting into the atmosphere. So in December of 2017, there was 1.108 million barrels of ethanol being produced per day. There's 42 gallons in a barrel. This is an incredible amount of ethanol that's going into fuel, and especially into aircraft jet fuels, which burn millions and millions, just billions of gallons of fuel, incredible numbers. The forecast for corn 2016 to 2017 was 5.475 billion bushels of corn to be used to make ethanol. So it's a huge market. It's a global market, not just in this country, but in South America, in Europe, in China. Ethanol from corn is huge. So now I had to start sampling rainwater. I knew that glyphosate was in ethanol. I knew that it would be getting into the atmosphere. So I had to start sampling rainwater, and I did.
So when it gets vaporized, when some of the fuel gets vaporized, the glyphosate part remains part of glyphosate remains part of a longer chain, or does it float around as glyphosate by itself?
No, it's attached to the water molecule and the ethanol.
Oh.
The ethanol is vaporized, and it's esterified with glyphosate. It goes into the atmosphere, attaches to water molecules. Then when it rains, it's raining glyphosate. Now, how do we prove this? Well, I analyzed rainwater from around the planet.
Did you have to use proteolysis to separate the glyphosate in the water, or directly be able to test it?
I was able to directly test it.
Oh.
Using the ELISA method, the enzyme attaches to the amine of glyphosate, and then that produces the color change, and you're able to detect it. I also looked using liquid chromatography. And I only found around a part per billion with liquid chromatography. The chromatogram was not fully quantifiable because it was such a low amount, but the chromatogram occurred where glyphosate
should have been
sets up. So I was able to confirm by two methods, by liquid chromatography and also by ELISA.
So the guess would be more of the glyphosate was still embedded in the ester, in the ethanol, rather than freely floating in the water.
Right, but then that's bound to water molecules
in
the atmosphere.
Of course.
And then when it rains, it's raining glyphosate. So the U.S. Geological Survey's concept idea that glyphosate was attaching to dirt particles and becoming part of rainwater isn't what's happening. It's the biofuel industry contaminating the atmosphere, which means that rainwater from these biofuels is contaminating the soil, ponds, stream, oceans, all around the planet.
Oh yeah, all the air currents moving around, and also some of it may be picked up by the weather front when you spray glyphosate physically over a field by an aircraft. Some of it might be also floating around and being picked up with the weather front and then move on.
Yeah, drift and transpiration are also possibilities, but mainly glyphosate is getting into the atmosphere.
Of course.
From biofuels.
Yeah. Now, and the bigger cities which are having 500 planes coming in and out a day, they're all burning the goddamn thing.
Hundreds of thousands of flights a day.
Yeah.
What I found was glyphosate in about 50% of the samples that I tested. Only about half the samples I tested had glyphosate.
Rainwater.
In rainwater. Now, this is where I found glyphosate. I found glyphosate in Spain. I found glyphosate in Germany. I found glyphosate in Deerfield, New Hampshire, where I live. I found glyphosate in Hilo, Hawaii, on the Hawaiian Islands. And I also found glyphosate on the rooftop at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
From the rainwater collected from the roof?
At MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So, like I said, 50% of the samples I've tested had glyphosate in the rain.
So I suppose the other 50% where there no glyphosate are countries where planes are not flying.
Not necessarily. It could be in the rain, but just below the limit of detection. The molecules are there. Remember, in one microgram of glyphosate, that's 1 part per billion, there's 3.561 trillion molecules of glyphosate per microgram or part per billion. That's a lot of molecules.
Yes.
So when it rains, it's destroying our soils, it's destroying the ocean, it's destroying our streams. We're breathing it.
You know, Anthony, when I was a small kid in school in India, and we were taught English, which was a foreign language, and I didn't speak it early, and we were being taught in higher classes various phrases. One of the phrases taught to me, which I remember, is that when it rains, it pours. So that was an English phrase. So here we can say, when it rains, it pours glyphosate.
It's pouring glyphosate. Very true. And that's very disturbing because it's not only raining it, but the humidity in the air that we're breathing,
it's carrying it.
That's contaminated with glyphosate. It's being absorbed through the lungs.
And it is water. It is water soluble.
And it's going into the bloodstream. When you breathe and inhale glyphosate contaminated air, you're breathing glyphosate and it's going into your bloodstream.
Yeah. So that makes it the Rainwater project. Anything more to add to this?
No.
You are having some sort of a statistics, or somebody is able to have a statistics of the content of the concentration of glyphosate in rainwater in places where they already found it, whether it's staying steady or increasing over a period of time.
It's constantly changing depending on the emissions that are being released in the atmosphere. Back in the early 70s, I worked on a lot of air and water quality projects for the Environmental Protection Agency. I did a lot of air sampling, a lot of stream sampling, ocean sampling for other types of contaminants, including PCBs and arsenic and various contaminants from coal burning power plants. I've done a lot of air quality and water quality work, so it's not something that I'm new to. Confirm that glyphosate is coming from biodiesel and bioethanol fuels, the gasoline and jet fuels that we're burning, corn for ethanol is corrupting and polluting the planet.
Yeah, of course. First of all, it's polluting the planet by cutting down forests in order to produce this crop, in order to make fuel. So first of all, removing the forest itself is a pollution, and then adding a polluting program of agriculture is adding, and then the final product is being burned all over, and the skies are being polluted.
And so, from that aspect, glyphosate is affecting all 7 kingdoms of biology.
That's a different subject, so let's stop this one.